The bone still radiated warmth when she drew it from the permafrost for millennia after the last mammoth had taken its final breath. The skull felt almost alive, as if it had exhaled moments before she touched it. This wasn't supposed to be real. Every biology book, museum display, and nature show had long since declared the woolly mammoth extinct, wiped out at the close of the last ice age. 10,000 years gone, lost beneath melting glaciers and shifting ecosystems. But here, on a remote frozen island above Siberia, Russian paleontologist Sergei Vartanyan held something that defied everything science had claimed to be true. What he uncovered next would turn extinction theory on its head and unearth a secret entombed in ice for 4,000 years. The mammoth he had discovered had still been alive when the pyramids were already ancient history. When Abraham roamed Mesopotamia and Bronze Age cities began to rise, this creature was still roaming the wine-lashed Arctic, untouched by time. Welcome to Wrangel Island, a place where the impossible didn't just happen, it thrived. A forgotten corner of the world where the final chapter of the Mammoth Saga unfolded in ways far stranger and more haunting than anyone could have predicted. Picture a landmass about the size of Delaware, drifting in the Arctic Ocean like a stony lifeboat dotted with tundra. Wrangel Island lies 87 miles north of the Siberian mainland, cloaked in fog most of the year and battered by winds that scream past 140 miles per hour. It's nature's version of a maximum security prison, not for keeping threats out, but for trapping something incredible within. And somehow, for 6,000 years after their kin vanished from the mainland, a group of woolly mammoths called this icy outpost home. When the Ice Age drew to a close around 12,000 years ago, rising ocean waters transformed Wrangel from a hill on the Siberian steppe into an isolated island. The mammoths caught there were cut off entirely, marooned on a sliver of land barely noticeable on most maps, maybe 500 strong, 1,000 at most. That's fewer than the student body of an average high school, and they were all that remained on Earth. Now here's where it gets truly bizarre. These weren't pitiful survivors clinging to existence on the edge of extinction. Bone isotope analysis tells a radically different story, one that will turn your expectations upside down. Right up to their final days, the Wrangel mammoths were flourishing. Think of isotope data as a biological report card, and these mammoths were earning top marks. Nitrogen levels showed no signs of food scarcity. Carbon readings revealed no evidence of hunger or stress. So, if they were so healthy, what could have possibly wiped them out? For thousands of years, they lived much as their ancestors had, roaming the island tundra, following ancient migratory instincts in endless loops within their 2,900 square mile enclosure. The islands seemed perfectly tailored to sustain them. Unlike the warming mainland, Wrangel retained the cold, dry steppe that had supported mammoths for eons. It was as if time had sealed them in a biological time capsule and forgotten to hit the stop button. But isolation has a cost that grows steeper with each passing generation. When scientists finally sequenced DNA from these last survivors, they uncovered something that reshaped our entire understanding of extinction. These weren't just the final representatives of a dying breed, they were walking genetic wrecks. Let me show you just how deep the damage went. Start with their sense of smell. A mammoth's trunk contains over 40,000 muscles, like a Swiss Army knife that can pick up scents from miles away. That trunk was essential for finding food, identifying relatives, sensing danger, and choosing mates. But the Wrangel mammoths had lost large chunks of the genes that controlled their olfactory system. Imagine losing the ability to taste chocolate or coffee. For mammoths, losing smell meant losing their entire social world. Picture a mother unable to identify her calf, males unable to tell which females were in heat. The intricate social web that governed mammoth herds for millions of years began to unravel, all because they could no longer sense each other. Even their urinary proteins, key for marking territory and expressing dominance, were breaking down due to genetic mutations. The chemical language mammoths once used to communicate had become nothing but static. Stranger still, many of them had started growing pale, translucent fur. The thick, insulating coats that helped them survive the Ice Age were morphing into silky, ineffective coverings, more fashion statement than functional armor. This is what scientists call genomic meltdown. When a species becomes too small and too isolated, harmful mutations begin to pile up faster than natural selection can remove them. Each generation becomes more flawed than the last. But here's the mystery. These mammoths didn't vanish quickly. Genomic meltdown usually wipes out a species in a few hundred generations. It's like playing genetic Russian roulette, and Wrangell's mammoths beat the odds for 6,000 years. Somehow, they lasted more than 200 generations. Despite mounting DNA errors, frayed communication, and weakening fur, they endured. The answer may lie in their bizarre sanctuary. With no predators on Wrangell, they didn't need perfect instincts to survive. Food was plentiful. Competition was non-existent. The island's brutal cold, which would have been lethal elsewhere, actually shielded them. It was like they'd been placed in a biological panic room safe from the usual forces of natural selection. On Wrangell, their flaws didn't kill them, not right away. But this protective shell came with a silent countdown. And what scientists recently discovered is more disturbing than any mutation. These animals weren't slowly decaying toward extinction. In fact, the most damaging genetic defects were being purged over time. They weren't dying, they were adapting. After 6,000 years alone, the Wrangell mammoths had stabilized. Their population had begun recovering genetically. Evolution was finally tipping in their favor, which makes what happened next feel like a punch to the gut. Roughly 4,000 years ago, something shifted. Sulfur levels spiked dramatically. It's like stumbling onto a geological crime scene where the evidence is screaming that something catastrophic occurred. The landscape itself turned hostile, and when you hear what likely triggered it, you'll understand why this extinction was so uniquely tragic. Picture this: the island's mountains began eroding faster than ever possibly, driven by strange weather patterns. Ancient minerals, once locked away in stone, suddenly leached into the island's small freshwater supply. The streams and ponds that had sustained mammoths for millennia were becoming toxic. The most likely cause: a deceptively gentle-sounding event called rain on snow. But don't be fooled, this is one of nature's most vicious traps. Here's how it plays out. A rare warm winter storm dumps rain onto the snow-covered ground. That rain freezes on contact, forming a solid layer of ice over everything. Vegetation that mammoths relied on is instantly sealed beneath an icy shell. These were animals that needed to eat almost constantly hundreds of pounds of food every day. With their meals trapped under ice, starvation would have come swiftly. This wasn't a slow fade into oblivion. It was a sudden, cruel erasure of a species that had just started to recover. And now comes the part that will truly break your heart. Just a few hundred years after the last mammoth died, and I blink in geological time, humans stepped foot on Wrangell Island for the first time. At a site on the southern coast called Chertoff Ovrag, archaeologists uncovered evidence of Paleo-Eskimo hunters who set up a seasonal camp about 3,600 years ago. These weren't mammoth hunters. By then, the giants were already long gone. The tools and remains at the site tell the story of people who came for seabirds and marine mammals. They built simple shelters, carved ivory harpoons, and lived off the ocean's bounty. But they must have seen the bones. Skulls scattered across the tundra, some still oddly fresh. The Chukchi people of Siberia still speak of ancient giants who once roamed the north. Maybe those legends were born right here on Wrangell. And the bitter irony is hard to ignore. If the mammoths had survived just a little longer, another few centuries, they would have met humans. But not the same kind who had wiped them out on the mainland. These newcomers weren't armed with spears for mammoth hunting. They were part-time visitors, hunting birds. The mammoths had survived genetic collapse, isolation, and 6,000 years of solitude, only to be undone by a freak weather event. Their end wasn't inevitable. It was an accident. Would the mammoths have made it if they'd met humans? There's no way to say for sure. But knowing they had already survived 6,000 years of shrinking numbers, failing genes, and brutal weather, it's haunting to imagine how close they came. They missed the chance by a blink. There are no signs of slaughter in their final remains, no shattered bones, no gnawed joints, no traces of illness. One layer of earth holds their fossils. The next is silent. Just like that, they vanished from the record. At the end, there were probably only around 300 left, scattered across nearly 3,000 square miles of frozen island. Imagine that tiny family groups wandering alone across the ice, never realizing they were the last. The future of an entire species held in just a few hundred lives. And when the end came, it struck too fast for evolution to keep up. The bones still scattered across Wrangel Island don't just tell a story of extinction. They tell us something deeper, that even small, fragile populations can persist far beyond what science expects. But their survival always hangs on a thread. One bad winter, one shift in wind or rain, and everything changes. These mammoths didn't slowly fade away. They were ambushed, and that's a truth that reaches far beyond fossils. Because survival isn't just about having enough DNA or big enough numbers. It's about chance, about timing, about weather. It's about being lucky enough to live through the moment no one saw coming. The difference between thriving and disappearing can be nothing more than an icy rainstorm. Today, Wrangel Island is still a sanctuary. It holds the densest population of polar bears in the world. Arctic foxes slink between driftwood and bone. Walruses bask on shores where mammoth herds once thundered. Life continues on the very same land that gave the giants their last refuge. And deep beneath the frozen ground, more bones lie waiting. Still locked in permafrost, still untouched. Each one a message in a bottle from a world where the unthinkable happened every day. Where giants once lived on the edge of the world, carrying millions of years of history inside bodies already beginning to break. The last mammoth died alone 4,000 years ago beneath a sky that hadn't changed in millennia. But what chills me most isn't how it ended. It's this: that mammoth had no idea it was the last. It probably spent its final hours doing exactly what mammoths had always done, searching for food, calling for its herd, living as if the next sunrise was just another day.